Okay, so I never thought I'd be sharing something this personal online, but I'm literally shaking as I type this and I need to get it off my chest. For context, I'm Alexa, 29F, and I work as an elementary school teacher in Boston. My sister Madison, 32F, is this super successful marketing executive who's always been the golden child in our family. Our dad, Robert, the 60am, runs his own business and has always been our rock, especially after Mom passed away 5 years ago. About 8 months ago, Dad was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. The doctors at Mass General gave him some options, but the most promising treatment was this experimental therapy that insurance wouldn't fully cover. We're talking about $200,000 out of pocket, which is insane, right? Dad has good savings, but he's been putting most of his money back into his business over the years. At the same time all this was happening, Madison announced her engagement to Brandon, this guy from a super wealthy family who works in finance. She started planning this extravagant wedding at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, with a reception at the country club in Brookline. If you're from Boston, you know these places are crazy expensive. Every time I visited Dad at the hospital, Madison would show up with new wedding samples, cake tastings, flower arrangements, custom invitations from some fancy stationery place in the North End. I noticed Dad seemed worried about money, which was unusual for him. He's always been generous but practical. One day, while helping him organize some paperwork in his home office, I noticed some strange transfers from his accounts. Large sums, $25,000 here, $30,000 there, going to various vendors with names like Elite Events and Lux Catering. My stomach dropped. I recognized these names from Madison's wedding planning binder that she'd left at Dad's house. I dug deeper and found that over $150,000 had been diverted from Dad's medical fund to pay for Madison's dream wedding. I felt physically sick. When I confronted Dad, he got teary-eyed and admitted that Madison had convinced him that the experimental treatment was too risky and probably wouldn't work anyway. She told him she'd found a more affordable treatment option and that he should enjoy his remaining time by seeing her get married in style. Dad, being Dad, couldn't say no to his oldest daughter. I was furious. I drove straight to Madison's downtown condo and confronted her. The conversation still makes my blood boil when I think about it. How could you do this to him? I demanded, showing her the bank statements. Madison barely looked up from her laptop. Don't be so dramatic, Alexa. Dad wants to see me have my perfect day before he's gone. He offered to help. He offered because you manipulated him. This money was for a treatment that could save his life. She finally closed her laptop and looked at me with this cold expression I'd never seen before. Look, the doctors said it's a long shot anyway. Why throw away money on something that probably won't work? At least this way Dad gets to experience something joyful. Something joyful? You mean watching you blow his treatment money on gold-plated table settings and Dom Perignon? That's when she threatened me, said if I told anyone or tried to interfere with her wedding plans, she'd make sure I couldn't see Dad in his final months. Said she'd tell everyone I was having mental health issues due to Dad's diagnosis, that I was becoming unstable. Reminded me that she had healthcare power of attorney since she was older, and I was too emotional to make rational decisions. Who do you think everyone will believe? The successful businesswoman or the struggling teacher who can barely make rent? She smirked. I left her place in tears, feeling completely helpless. Madison had always been manipulative, but this was a whole new level of betrayal. I couldn't believe she would sacrifice our father's chance at survival for a single day of showing off to her friends and future in-laws. But I'm not the type to give up easily. If Madison thought she could steamroll over me and Dad, she had another thing coming. I decided that instead of creating a scene right away, I'd gather evidence, build a case, and then expose her at the most strategic moment possible. Over the next few weeks, I started my secret plan. I met with Dad's oncologist, Dr. Chen, and explained the situation. He was horrified and agreed to help by providing documentation about how beneficial the experimental treatment could be for Dad's specific cancer. I also contacted a financial advisor friend who helped me document all the suspicious transfers. I discovered that Brandon's family was paying for half of the wedding expenses, under the impression that our family was covering the other half from our substantial family wealth. Madison's words, not mine. They had no idea the money was coming from Dad's medical fund. I kept everything under wraps, pretending to make peace with Madison. I even agreed to be her bridesmaid, though it made me sick to my stomach to play along. I helped with dress fittings at Priscilla of Boston and smiled through her ridiculous complaints about how the champagne at her bachelorette party in the Hamptons wasn't premium enough. All the while, I was building my case and waiting for the perfect moment. The wedding was scheduled for June 15th at Trinity Church in Copley Square. 2 days before, I helped Dad check out of the hospital temporarily. He was weak, but determined to see Madison get married. What he didn't know was that I had a very different role planned for him than just giving away the bride. Updated. The morning of Madison's wedding was sunny and clear, perfect Boston weather for a June ceremony. I picked up Dad early from his Beacon Hill brownstone, telling him we needed to get to the church ahead of time for family photos. He was frail but determined, dressed in his best Tom Ford suit that now hung loose on his thinning frame. "You okay, sweetheart?" Dad asked as I helped him into my beat-up Honda Civic, quite the contrast to the fleet of black Escalades Madison had rented for the bridal party. "You seem tense." "Just wedding day jitters," I lied, my heart pounding against my ribs. In my tote bag were all the documents I'd gathered: bank statements, medical records, and a letter from Dr. Chen explaining Dad's treatment options and potential prognosis with proper care. We arrived at Trinity Church an hour before the ceremony. The place was already buzzing with staff setting up elaborate floral arrangements that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Madison had hired a wedding planner from some fancy New York agency, and this lady with a clipboard and AirPods was barking orders about peony placement like it was a matter of national security. "Alexa, what is Dad doing here already?" Madison hissed, appearing from the bridal suite in a silk robe, her hair in rollers. "He's supposed to arrive with the groomsmen, and why aren't you dressed in your bridesmaid gown?" "Change of plans," I said calmly, helping Dad to a seat in the front pew. Dad and I wanted to take in the atmosphere before things get hectic. Madison's eyes narrowed suspiciously, but the arrival of her future mother-in-law distracted her. Mrs. Peterson was this perfectly coiffed, back-bay socialite who'd been treating Madison like a daughter since the engagement. She had no idea her son was marrying someone capable of stealing from her dying father. "We'll talk about this later," Madison whispered threateningly before plastering on a smile for Mrs. Peterson. I spent the next 45 minutes pretending everything was normal, helping Dad drink water and greeting guests as they arrived. Brandon's family friends were a who's who of Boston elite. I recognized a tech CEO, a state senator, and even a Red Sox pitcher among them. Madison had strategically placed herself in this world, and I was about to pull the rug out from under her Louboutins. At exactly 15 minutes before the ceremony was set to begin, when both families and all the important guests were present but before Madison would make her entrance, I stood up and clinked a spoon against a water glass. "Everyone, if I could, have your attention for a moment," I called out. The chatter died down as people turned to look at me curiously. Madison, who had been peeking out from the bridal suite, froze in visible panic. For those who don't know me, I'm Alexa, Madison's sister and bridesmaid. Before we begin this beautiful ceremony, my father Robert has something important he'd like to share with all of you. Dad looked confused but took the microphone I handed him. I whispered in his ear, "Dad, I need to show you something," and placed the financial documents in his lap. His face went from confusion to shock to deep hurt as he quickly scanned the papers. I hated seeing the pain in his eyes, but he needed to know the truth. "What is this?" he asked quietly. "Madison has been taking money from your medical fund to pay for this wedding," I explained gently. "Over $150,000 that should have gone to your experimental treatment." The color drained from his face. By now, guests were murmuring, and Brandon's parents were exchanging concerned glances. Madison was storming toward us, her white robe flapping behind her like angry wings. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she hissed, grabbing my arm. Dad looked up at her, his eyes filled with hurt and disbelief. "Madison, is this true? The money for the wedding? It came from my treatment fund?" Madison's face cycled through several emotions before settling on indignation. "Dad, Alexa is just jealous. She's always been jealous of our relationship. This is her trying to ruin my special day." But Dad was looking at the papers, the transfers with dates and amounts that corresponded exactly to vendor deposits for the wedding. It was all there in black and white. "Mrs. Peterson," I said, turning to Brandon's mother, "your family has been incredibly generous paying for half of this wedding. Did you know the other half was coming from funds meant to save my father's life? Money for a potentially life-saving treatment that Madison convinced him was not worth trying?" The church went completely silent. You could have heard a communion wafer drop. Brandon stepped forward from where the groomsmen had gathered. "What is she talking about, Madison?" Madison was cornered, and like many people in that situation, she doubled down. "It's Dad's money. He can spend it however he wants. He wants to see me happy before I die?" Dad interrupted, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. "Is that what you were counting on, Madison? That I'd be gone before anyone discovered what you'd done?" Brandon's father, a stern-looking man in a bespoke suit, put his hand on his son's shoulder. "I think we need to delay this ceremony while we sort this out." "There's nothing to sort out," Madison shrieked, mascara starting to run down her face. "Alexa is lying. She's always been jealous of me, always trying to turn Dad against me." Dr. Chen, who I'd invited as my +1 specifically for this moment, stood up from his seat. "Mr. Turner, as your oncologist, I can confirm that the experimental treatment we discussed has shown promising results for patients with your exact condition. The funds that were reallocated could have given you a fighting chance. Madison looked like she was about to explode. You brought his doctor? Are you freaking kidding me right now? Brandon was looking at Madison with growing horror. Did you really take money from your father's cancer treatment to pay for flower walls? And a champagne fountain? It's more complicated than that, Madison stammered, looking around desperately for allies but finding none. Mrs. Peterson stepped forward, her voice ice cold. Brandon, we're leaving. Now. She turned to the gathered guests. I apologize, everyone, but it appears there will be no wedding today. The next few minutes were chaos. Guests began gathering their things and whispering among themselves. Brandon's parents huddled with him in a corner, occasionally glancing our way with disgust. The wedding planner was frantically making calls, probably trying to figure out if she was still getting paid. Through it all, Dad sat silently, the papers still in his lap, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Madison stormed up to me, tears streaking her makeup. You've ruined everything, she seethed. You had no right. No, Madison. You ruined everything when you decided your one day of playing princess was worth more than Dad's life, I replied, surprised by how calm I felt. You can try to spin this however you want, but we both know what you did. Dad suddenly stood up, wobbling slightly. I rushed to steady him. I need to go home, he said quietly. As I helped Dad toward the exit, Madison made one last, desperate attempt. Daddy, please let me explain. It wasn't how it looks. Dad stopped and turned to look at her. There was no anger in his face, just profound disappointment. Not now, Madison. I just can't look at you right now. Those words seemed to hit her harder than any shouting could have. She crumpled into a nearby pew as we walked out of the church into the bright June sunshine. In the car, Dad was quiet for a long time. Finally, as we drove past Boston Common, he spoke. I should have seen it. I didn't want to believe Madison could be so calculating. It's not your fault, Dad, I said, fighting back tears. She's always been good at getting what she wants. What happens now? He asked, sounding lost. I took a deep breath. Now we get you that treatment. I've been saving up, and I'm going to sell my condo. Between that and what we can recover from the wedding vendors with cancellations, we should have enough. Alexa, I can't let you— Yes, you can, I interrupted. That's what family does. Real family. We take care of each other. That evening, as I helped Dad settle back at home, my phone exploded with texts and calls from relatives and friends who'd been at the wedding. Madison had apparently told everyone I'd had a psychotic break and ruined her wedding out of jealousy, but the evidence I'd presented was too clear, and people weren't buying her story. Brandon called me directly, his voice somber. I wanted to thank you, he said. It's better I found out who she really is now rather than after we were married. The next day, I met with Dr. Chen to get Dad back on the waiting list for the experimental treatment. Thanks to the doctor's advocacy, they agreed to admit Dad within 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Madison had holed up in her downtown condo, refusing to speak to anyone except through her lawyer. She was demanding her share of Dad's estate immediately, claiming emotional distress. Dad, showing more backbone than I'd seen in years, instructed his lawyer to tell her that if she pursued any legal action, he would file charges for financial elder abuse. That shut her up quickly. As painful as this whole experience has been, I don't regret what I did. Some family secrets need to be exposed to the light no matter how ugly or painful. Sometimes standing up for what's right means being willing to create a scene even in the middle of a church filled with Boston's elite. And honestly, the look on Madison's face when her perfect wedding crashed down around her designer heels? Worth it. Final update. It's been just over a year since the wedding that never was, and I wanted to give you guys a quick update because so many of you have reached out with support and questions. The best news first, Dad's been in remission for almost 3 months now. The experimental treatment at Dana-Farber worked better than even Dr. Chen expected. Dad's not completely out of the woods, but his latest scans look promising, and he's regained most of his strength. We celebrated by taking a weekend trip to Cape Cod last month. Nothing fancy, just lobster rolls at this little shack in Wellfleet and walks on the beach. But seeing Dad able to enjoy simple pleasures again made it feel like the Ritz. As for Madison, well, she's trying to rebuild her life, but karma's a persistent thing. Brandon broke off all contact after discovering some other shady financial moves she'd made during their engagement. She lost her marketing job when the story got around in Boston's tight-knit business circles. Turns out companies aren't super eager to hire someone with a reputation for embezzling from dying relatives. She's made some attempts to reconcile with Dad, sending tearful emails about how sorry she is and how she's changed. Dad, with his huge heart, has met with her a couple times for coffee, but he's keeping her at arm's length. Trust, once broken like that, doesn't snap back easily. Me. I'm still teaching third grade and loving it. Sold my condo in Somerville to help with Dad's medical bills, and I'm renting a cute little place in Jamaica Plain now. Smaller, but it has this amazing porch where Dad and I drink coffee on Sunday mornings. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything in the short term, but gives you something priceless in return. In my case, it gave me more time with my dad. And that's worth more than all the fancy weddings in the world. Thanks for listening to my story, Reddit. Hug your loved ones tight today.